close your eyes for a moment, if you can, and let the rain set the pace. This is the oracle's dream. Listen to the soft, steady hymn of water on the street. Imagine it as a slow, feathered hand turning the pages of the day until you rest on a single, warm line. Breathe with it. Breathe in and out. In the hush between breaths, there is a bakery with a painted door and a kettle that lives on an old ring of iron like a small, patient heart. Lily wakes before the sky. She always has. The hour when the world is porous and forgiving suits her hands like familiar maps, each line a route she has traveled dozens of times. They find the slippers by habit, the soft scrape of wool against worn floorboard, the little squeak of the cupboard as it admits the kettle, the small, decisive click of the latch that opens onto the steady world of humming ovens and flour-dusted benches. The rain is a companion rather than a hindrance, an ancient, low voice that sets the tempo. It pools at the threshold, presses soft fingers against the glass, and inside the bakery, the light is the pale, obliging light of early hours. She makes tea as she always does. Water meets the kettle with a metallic sigh. A tiny chorus begins, bubbling, a gentle rattle, while she rinses a wooden spoon and turns the page of a little notebook where recipes live in pencil and smudged ink. The steam rises like a private breath, curling through the kitchen and carrying with it the faint, sweet memory of last night's crumble. She inhales, and the scent of dried citrus and a ghost of clove twist into the steam. The kettle sings a little higher, a single note that hangs like a small bell in the cool air. She pours tea into a chipped mug, watching the surface ripple as a finger does across still water. And for a moment the whole room seems to widen to accommodate that single soft sound. The bakery is a sanctuary of repeatable motions, the rolling of a pin, the whisper of flour across the board, the house clock giving its soft, measured tick. Each motion is a ritual, and rituals steady the heart. Lily moves through them with an economy of motion, reach, scoop, fold, so that even the busiest instant unfurls slowly enough for a listener to follow without hurry. When she lifts a bowl, the bowl answers with a small thud. When she presses the dough into its tart tin, the pastry murmurs like a sleeper turning beneath a blanket. These are little ceremonies that keep time from rushing away. Outside, the rain writes letters on the window pane. In the dream, the letters are tiny runes. They do not demand interpretation so much as attention. Lily reads them in the way someone reads the weather, simply with an acceptance that some things are only what they are. Wet, inevitable, tempering. She sets a tray of freshly roasted pumpkin to the side, its orange glow modest against the gray morning, and begins the slow work that will become the first offering of the day. Roasting the pumpkin is a small, radiant labor. She halves the fruit and slides the knife in with a deliberate, compassionate gesture, feeling the resistance give, hearing the faint, soft crackle of fibers yielding. The seeds rattle like tiny harvested beads when she scoops them free, and she sets them aside to toast later in a shallow pan, letting them sing their own mild, crisp song. The flesh goes into the oven, and the heat begins its alchemy. Sugars bloom and edges brown, an aroma rising that is neither urgent nor loud, but insistent in the best way. Spice and earth, a hint of sun stored through winter. As the oven works, Lily wipes the bench with a cloth whose fibers have known flour for years. Each pass gathers a little more of yesterday's memory, and the cloth releases it with a small, contented sound. She reaches for the spices as if appointing small helpers. Cinnamon, cardamom, a hopeful pinch of nutmeg that she shakes as though depositing tiny stars. Each spice is measured with the same hand that has learned to slow itself. Teaspoon, half, a gentle heap, and each measurement is a repeated benediction. The spices are tokens in a quiet language. In the dream they are read like runes, and yet they are, at their most practical, simply flavors that lift the pumpkin and make it sing. A wooden spoon stirs the puree, a sound that has a steady rhythm. 1, 2, turn. The spoon scrapes the bowl and whispers along the glass. The motion calms like a pendulum, and Lily finds in it a trust that things will fold together as they should. She presses the crust into a low tin with her fingertips. The pastry yields under her touch, flaky, cool, and the tiny cracks that blot the surface are proof that it will bake into layers, a gentle architecture of texture. A few grains of sugar catch the light and look like luck. She pricks the base with a fork. The pins of the tines sing as they lift and settle back into the ready dough. The oven door opens with a familiar hiss, an intake of breath, and the pie slides into that small domestic hearth where heat does its quiet, patient reading. For a moment she stands with the oven door still warmed against her palms and imagines the heat inside as something like counsel. Not loud, not prescriptive, but warming whatever it touches until it offers back an answer, soft and fragrant. Seamus arrives like a slow, familiar turning of a street corner. The bell over the bakery door tinkles, and the rain presses itself back into its rhythm. He is wrapped in a coat that has known more seasons than it cares to count, and his voice when he greets her is a deep, kind instrument that seems to have the memory of many cups of tea behind it. He carries with him a small umbrella always, even when the clouds are only thinking of rain. Habit is a comfort. He sits at the counter with the ease of someone who has spent a gallery of mornings in this exact chair, and Lily pours him a cup. The kettle answers with a thin steam, a small, warming exhale that rises between them. They do not speak of anything urgent. Conversation in the bakery moves like the pastry, tenderly, slowly, layered with pauses that invite each other to linger. He asks after her hands. She tells him the oven was honest today. He mentions the twins from down the lane who have started to learn to whistle, and she laughs quietly, a sound that is all kindness. Between them, the world is tidy and repairable. News and small jokes fold into the steam of tea. When the pie emerges, golden and smelling of sun and spice, Seamus leans forward as if to read the aroma like a page. He calls it a good sign. Nothing portentous, only the kind of small blessing the regulars give one another like coins in a bowl. The pie's scent fills the room, and something in the air gathers as if to listen. There is ginger and a gentle heat of cinnamon, a low, rounded sweetness from the pumpkin that is neither cloying nor thin. When Lily cuts a small wedge and slides it onto a saucer, the knife makes a soft, shushing sound, the way water parts for a stone. The fork enters, flakes the top, and Seamus closes his eyes for a second with the first taste, as though tasting a memory. The pastry crumbles on his tongue, the filling warm and steady. For a moment, in the dream, the pie reads like a little oracle. There is comfort in the predictable sweetness and in the fidelity of old recipes. Yet, even as the dream leans that way, the narrator will only observe that the oven's warmth felt like counsel that morning. That is all. Names for such things are small and personal, not doctrines to be preached. There are sounds that knit the morning together, the soft scrape of a knife on a board, the rustle of a paper bag as Lily folds it closed for a regular's loaf, the distant patter on the windows that keeps on in a patient, reassuring rhythm. Every sound is a stitch. Together they make the garment of the place. When Lily hands Seamus his tea and a slice of pie wrapped in a scrap of oiled paper, there is a quiet exchange of gratitude. He takes the parcel with hands that have known much work, and he presses a small handful of toasted pumpkin seeds into her palm. Hot from the oven and crackling with the satisfying nutty scent. He smiles in that slow way of his, and the world seems a little less complicated for a span of breath. As the pie cools and the kettle settles, Lily wipes the crumbs into a neat mound and brings the cloth to her lips, tasting the faint sweetness that the cloth carries like a secret. She moves to the window and watches the rain drag little silver paths down the glass. Fairy lights along the display counter are still sleepless from the night's vigil, blinking like small fireflies that have decided to stay. Their warmth is faint but certain. It colors the steam and paints a tiny warmth over the bench. In the dream, these lights are tiny altars, each bulb a tiny offering of illumination. In the life that holds the dream they are merely bulbs, and yet the distinction is unhurried and gentle enough for both to be true. The first vignette closes its soft loop as the morning settles. The pumpkin pie's edge is crisper now, the filling having asked and received the right measure of patience. The spice tin sits open like an amen. Seamus tucks the parcel under his coat and shuffles toward the door, the bell chiming his departure into the rain-strewn street. Lily watches until he disappears beneath the umbrella-lined gloom, then turns back to the bench with a small, quiet contentment that lives in the hollow of the throat. It is not a triumph. It is not even a lesson. It is the simple, moderate satisfaction of work well done and of a community that returns your work with something that looks very much like gratitude. If this little hour comforts you, and if you would like to come back to an evening like this again, there is an easy way to gather another of these small comforts. A soft, unobtrusive click will bring another story like this when you wish for it. But for now, stay with the rain. Let it keep time with your breath. The rain continues to set the tempo as Lily moves from pie to shelf, from oven to the high, narrow cupboard where her grandmother's cookbook lives between two tins of biscuit cutters. The book is a modest thing, its spine mended with tape, whose edges have softened into pale, honest ribbons. When she slips it free, the air shifts as if remembering. Pages, once still for decades, breathe out the scent of butter and something older. Paper warmed by many hands. The handwriting is a looping script, each letter a memory of a wrist and a voice. In the margins there are tiny notes, shorthand like a wink. More spice if windy, or serve with extra cream on foggy mornings. These marginalia read like advice left on a kitchen shelf for anyone who needed it, and Lily reads them with the intimacy of someone reading a letter from a relative who knows the precise shape of your needs. She opens to a recipe for baked apples, a simple thing written in the kind of ink that has paled but refused to forget. The instructions are straightforward. Core, fill, bake. But in the scrap of handwriting, her grandmother had tucked a small, sly comment. Let them steam long enough to remember themselves. Lily smiles at that, understanding the unprecious language of practical superstition. She gathers the apples, firm, rosy-cheeked fruit with a smell that is all orchard sunlight and crisp air, and sets them on the board. The rain insists at the glass as she works, Each tap is a meter that keeps her hands to rhythm. Coring the apples becomes an intimate, small liturgy. She presses the tool into the top of the fruit and twists. The center yields with a soft, moist sound, and the hollow pocket left behind is a tiny chalice. She fills it carefully with brown sugar, a scattering of chopped walnuts, a small pat of butter that will melt into a tender pool, and a dusting of cinnamon that smells, for a moment, like warmth itself. The apricot jam from the jar at the back of the shelf spills a sunlit dot into the cavity of one apple, and Lily smooths it with the tip of her finger the way one might pat a sleeping child. The apples sink into a shallow tin, and the oven door closes once more with that small domestic sigh. As the apples bake, their juices bubble and perfume the air with a scent that is both immediate and layered. Sugar caramelizing, the sharp edge of apple melting into something more yielding, the deep, resinous shelter of cinnamon. The skin puckers in small, pleasing folds. Steam gathers at the glass and beads like tiny moons before sliding down to the sill. Lily wipes these beads with a cloth and finds, impressed upon the fabric, the faintest hint of caramel. She tastes the cloth without thinking, of course, just a tiny lick, and the sweetness that meets her tongue is a shortcut to an old, uncomplicated joy. The act is private and humble and perfect for a morning such as this. She turns the page of the cookbook, fingers tracing the old notes, and there comes a small line she has always loved. If you are lonely, lend an apple and keep the warmth. The instruction reads as a policy for living that is both modest and brave. Lily thinks of Rose, who lives 3 doors down and whose windows glow with many lamps in the evening, and she thinks of the twins who have a way of leaving footprints all across the flour on her floor. Community is composed of such small trades, a pie here, an apple there, and lives folded together like pastry. The door opens and the bell tinkles again. The light on the threshold is not quite the same as that which announces Seamus. This is closer, the shape of a neighbor who carries a parcel or an errand. The rain makes everything slightly translucent, and the boots in the doorway are a little blurred. The arrival softened in a way that makes ordinary things become almost ceremonial. Lily sets the cloth down, wipes her hands on her apron, and moves to greet whoever has come. The book left open on the bench like an invitation. The smell of baked apples presses at the air, and for the briefest instant, the room seems to tilt toward something both expected and new. She meets Rose in the doorway, her friend and neighbor wrapped in a coat that smells faintly of lavender and soil. Rose's presence is a steadying thing. Where Lily is the keeper of recipes, Rose is the keeper of small, bright interventions. Plants that find new pots, knitted scarves left on stools, a habit of noticing when someone's window is a little dimmer than before. They exchange the kind of greetings that carry weather and recipes and laughter like currency. Rose's smile has the quality of an offered hand, and in the dream it is akin to a small sign revealed at the end of a soft corridor. Rose steps in, and the rain presses at the glass as though to eavesdrop. She unwraps a parcel, a small bunch of bulbs swaddled in damp newspaper and twine. Their skins are papery and soft. Dirt clings to their roots like a stubborn confession. Lily cradles them as if they were a promise, and their earthy scent mingles with the caramel warmth issuing from the baking apples. Rose says little, which is a language of its own. There are occasions when silence is a present more suitable than speech, and sets the bulbs gently on the counter as if laying coins on an altar. She talks instead about the garden, the bits of green stubbornly tending to push through the dark. the ways in which bulbs learn the timetable of seasons, the way people learn to keep their breath in certain songs. Rose helps Lily tuck the apples into their tins, and then, as if remembering one more domestic art, she moves to the small windowsill herb garden and clips a sprig of thyme. The tiny leaves smell of sun-warmed stone and a particular grounding green. She rolls it between her fingers and sprinkles it across the apples before they go back into the oven for their last slow sweetening. The herb is a small voice of clarity in the chorus. When the apples come out later, the thyme will be the note that makes everything else sensible. They work together with a quiet choreography. Lily lifts, Rose pats, Lily slides, and Rose wipes. The movements are slow and shared, and in the dream they read like a twin sister write. Hands together planting bulbs, hands together setting the table. There is no hurry. Around them, the rain maintains its rhythm, and the fairy lights along the display look less like decoration and more like a line of watchful, soft stars. At the counter, the cookbook lies open, and the handwriting seems to watch over their hands. There is a page bookmarked with a scrap of ribbon where a recipe for something called Comfort Crumble waits like a promised future. Lily touches the margin where her grandmother once pressed a thumb full of jam to test the sugar. For a moment, the sound of pages turning is the loudest thing. Paper whispering against paper like the softest of wind chimes. The smell of the baking apples and the faint, dry dust of the book weave together and form an atmosphere that is almost tangible. A feeling of being historically anchored and at the same time lightly buoyed. Someone knocks again, faint and polite. The sound is small, as if it does not wish to startle. Lily moves toward the door with Rose at her shoulder, both of them a little expectant but mostly content. The rain has thinned into a steady hush, and the street outside looks like an old photograph recently given water. She reaches for the latch, and the world on the other side of the door is both familiar and slightly veiled, like a face half remembered. She draws the bolt back in a careful, measured way, as if opening a book to the next chapter without rushing to learn its end. The latch moves with the same soft, practiced pressure Lily has given it for years, and the door opens onto a small, brimming page of the street. The rain has thinned to a steady hush that blurs outlines into smudged watercolors. Two figures stand framed by the damp light. The twins, cheeks pink from the chill, grinning as if they've just shared a private, delicious secret. Between them, they hold something wrapped in brown paper and tied with string that has been knotted by small, careful fingers. Lily crouches so that she is at their level, because small hands deserve to be met on equal terms. They thrust the parcel forward like an offering and step back, hands shoved into coat pockets, boots tapping an impatient, delighted rhythm on the mat. When she unties the string, it comes away with a papery whisper, and inside is an umbrella. Green as moss with yellow polka dots and a little duck handle carved from painted wood, head turned as if peering at the world. It is almost too cheerful for the day, which makes it exactly right. "It's for you," one of the twins declares, urgent and solemn at once. "Mum says you left yours on Mrs. Larkin's bench 2 weeks ago. We thought you needed a new one, and," the other adds, and there is a conspiratorial drop in his voice, "we put a little bell on it, so it sings when you walk." Lily lifts the umbrella, feeling its curious weight, the tiny bell tinkling like a promise. She is surprised in a soft, round way that sits somewhere between pleasure and tenderness. The umbrella is small and perfectly formed. The duck's beak points outward. The canopy promises shelter. The little bell gives a note that will become familiar, a bright punctuation to the rain's long sentence. For a moment she turns it slowly, examining the printed circles, the neat rows of stitches that hold it whole. The gift is literal, and, in the slow language of the bakery, it immediately means something else. An answer at the level of gestures, a small covenant that someone has been watching out for her. The twins flee before she can insist on tea. Children have appointments with the world. But not before clipping a daisy behind her ear the wrong way round. A lopsided crown that makes Lily's smile larger than the day might strictly allow. She closes the door with a gentleness as if sealing a note inside. The bell overhead gives a polite chime, and the rain resumes its patient paragraph against the glass. Back at the counter, the apples are singing their last song. The oven opens, and a soft, syrupy perfume spills out. Brown sugar and tart apple, a kiss of butter, and the deeper note of toasted walnuts. The skins are wrinkled in the nicest way. The juices have thickened into rivulets that cradle the fruit. Lily lifts one on a palette knife and lets the steam rise against her face. It carries the orchard again. The clean, forgiving brightness of apples cut beneath an open sky. And something in her chest remembers being smaller and safer and very much warmed from the inside. She places a baked apple onto a shallow saucer and sets it before Rose, who accepts it like a benediction. Rose breaks the crust of the apple with her spoon. The surface cracks with a soft, sugared sigh. They eat together in companionable silence, the two of them listening to the rain and to the quiet clink of crockery. Sharing food is a small sacrament. It is the exchange of heat, time, and care. The apples taste of late afternoons and orchard ladders. The walnuts give a stutter of texture. The thyme Rose has tucked into the mixture lifts everything like a clue that makes sense of what preceded it. As they eat, Lily turns a page in the cookbook without meaning to, and a corner of goose grease paper slips free. There, tucked like a pressed flower, is a scrap of a letter, the edges browned and the ink little more than a ghost. Her grandmother's handwriting curves the way a river bends. The note reads, in a half-wry way, "An umbrella will not hold out the rain, but it will teach you the art of stepping in time." Lily reads it and allows the image to fold into the present. The umbrella in her hands, the rain like a metronome, and the lesson tacit and small. Outside, the bell over the door announces a single customer, someone who inhabits the sort of quiet a bakery requires. An elderly neighbor carrying a parcel of knitting, their fingers blue at the tips. They stand at the counter until Lily wraps another apple and tucks it inside a brown paper bag. She buttons Rose's coat for her where the collar tends to slump. Rose, in return, presses Lily's wrist, a brief, grounding contact. These are the stitches that bind the neighborhood. Tiny aids, exchanged without fuss, and with the kind of knowing that only comes from repeated mornings. The umbrella rests against the server's rail like a small sentinel, its colors bright enough to hush any gloom. When the morning loosens into midday, the bakery fills with a different kind of warmth. Children arrive in a migration that is loud and bright in the most necessary way. For them, the promise of cookies is as near to magic as the world allows. They troop in with cheeks flushed from puddle splashing, stopping just long enough to shake rain from hoods and shoes, and to inhale the oven's gifts like a language they already know. Cookie making begins with a mound of butter on the bench, too soft and golden. A small sun that creaks under the blade of a knife. Lily works it gently with sugar until the two consent to one another, the crystal teeth of the sugar breaking and folding into the butter with a soft grinding sound that makes the children pause and watch. Eggs crack like small resigned drums and slide into the mix. Flour rains through a sieve, a ghost and hush sound that makes tiny flour clouds in the air. Then the bowl receives the dry and the wet in a liaison that need not hurry. The dough comes together with a polite, yielding thud, and the bench becomes the scene of 1,000 small negotiations. Thumb impressions, the careful nursing of ragged edges, the pinch that saves a corner from collapse. Lily sprinkles in vanilla like a whisper. She teaches the twins to fold the dough rather than beat it, explaining that folding keeps the gluten gentle and the texture tender. They do it with wide-eyed concentration, fingers working like the hands of apprentices. Rolling begins, a wooden pin that turns under pressure, the dough flattening into a paper-thin map. The rolling pin sings a low, consistent note, skin against wood, and the children hum along almost without realizing. When the cutters come out, stars, hearts, little suns, the bench erupts into shapes, a constellation of treats. Then the stained glass cookies, a patient, very small alchemy. Hard-boiled sweets are nestled into a cloth and crushed with a pestle into bright fragments. The cutouts in the cookies that will hold the candy are cut clean and exact, and a spoon tucks the red shards into a heart, the blue into a star. As the heat reaches them, the candies melt into glossy windows, swelling slightly and catching the light like colored glass. The oven becomes a small stained glass studio for the village. When the cookies emerge, the children crowd the wire rack in a respectful, reverent cluster. The candy centers are set and luminous, like tiny jewels framed in pastry. There are sounds in this hour that play to the edges of sleep. The rustle of sugar, the scrape of a knife across a board, the blissful quiet that prayerlessly follows the act of pressing a cookie cutter. A child laughs because the dough stuck to their sleeve and they look like they have been powdered by a benevolent ghost. Another child tastes an edge of cookie and makes an exaggerated face of delight. The twins hang a freshly iced cookie on a small makeshift tree Lily keeps for such occasions. A twig set upright in a jar, branches heavy with flour-dusted ornaments. The tradition is nothing ceremonial in any theological sense. It is a practice that marks gratitude. Everyone in the bakery secretly leaves a token on the cookie tree, a coin, a lace, a folded paper with someone's name. It is a way of saying, without direct speech, that you belong. In the dream version of these things, because there is always a dream thread that runs behind the waking hours, the cookie tree becomes an actual tree that warms the air around it. A tree whose branches knit together with the warmth of an oven until the entire lane feels buffered from sorrow. Yet the dream is named as such. It is a way of reading the night and day, not rewriting them. The real pleasure is in the tangible. The cookie dough yielding, the caramel thin sheen of melted candy, the way sugar crystals crunch like a private snowfall beneath the teeth. As the perfect batch cools on racks and tins are stacked in a domestic, satisfying way. Lily wraps a small parcel of biscuits for each of the regulars, tucking them into paper pockets with the same attentive fingers she has given to pies and apples. The twins choose a special cookie each and press them into a paper cone, which they hand to the elderly neighbor as a sovereign gift. The neighbor's thanked eyes are a small weather in the day. Warmth circulates in the room like warm air rising. It requires no proclamation. When the last child leaves, their pockets full of crumbs and sunshine, the bakery quiets in a way that invites the next small transformation. As afternoon draws itself like a soft curtain, fog slides in from the river with a movement like the turning of a page. It is not gloom, but rather a thick, protective shawl that muffles the street and makes lamplight look embarrassed and sweet. The day folds into a grayer blue, and the bakery's fairy lights wake up, scattering tiny, steady colors across counters and jars. Lily sets a kettle on again and chooses to make something that takes time and attention. Fudge, the slow kind that asks to be coaxed and watched. Making fudge begins with the precise domestic ritual of a double boiler. A pan of water clicks to a simmer, then a bowl rests above it like a small, fragile vessel. The chocolate sits within the upper bowl, dark and below silent. A teasing steam lifts between the pans and the chocolate softens, losing its sharp edges and gathering into a glossy, obedient pool. Spoonfuls of butter go in, and the spoon traces the chocolate's surface in slow circles so that it yields without shame. The sound is a low, contented scrape, metal against ceramic, that appeals to the ear like a lullaby for hands. Lily prepares 3 flavors, because variety is the village's modest catechism. One pot is enhanced with a shaving of orange zest that smells of sun on a colder day. Another gets crushed hazelnuts that lend a warm, toasted crackle. The third is perfumed with a little peppermint that opens the palate like a sudden window. Each flavor takes on a personality as constant and soft as a neighbor's habit. She stirs and tastes, testing balance the way someone feels for keys in their pocket. The fudge thickens, ribboning from the spoon when it is ready, and the sound of that ribbon is a thick, satisfying whisper as it drops back and settles. In the dream, the fudge looks like concentrated memory, a compact of things people have said and done that will keep the village warm. But again, the narrator reminds us that image exists as one layer of the telling, gentle and optional. The more practical facts are also true. Jars are waiting. Parchment is laid in cake tins. The fudge must be poured and spread and scored before it sets. Lily presses down with a spatula, smoothing the surface until it catches the light in a way that seems to approve of the day's labors. As the mixture cools, the peppermint gives a tiny, bright sharpness that wakes the senses. The orange offers a soft citrus calm, and the hazelnut carries a steady, nutty honesty. Rose appears with her gloves muddy from the garden. "Shall we plant the bulbs now?" she asks, as if naming the next necessary thing. Planting has been paused like a bookmark since the morning. The bulbs that were given and then kept safe have been waiting for company. They go out together into the cool air. Lily, with her new umbrella tucked into a crook of her arm, its bell peeping a tiny sound as they step. The fog wraps around them like a shawl. Air smells of damp earth and the metallic, clean tang of the river. The soil is soft under their hands, welcoming. They dig small holes and sink the bulbs into them. The bulbs are firm and heart-shaped, and when they press them into the ground it feels like tucking a secret into a pocket. Rose pats the earth with thumb and palm until it hums a private approval. Their hands are smudged with soil, a badge of participation, a stain that does not demand cleanliness. The simple mechanics of planting, dig, set, backfill, press, are small proofs of continuity. The bulbs will sleep and then remember how to be green. In the dream version of this act, the bulbs unfurl at once, lending the lane a sudden, improbable spring. Back in the waking rhythm, they are promises, slow, patient, and entirely ordinary. As twilight gathers and the fog thins into delicate veils, a cluster of neighbors gathers outside the bakery. It is without ceremony. people who have wandered by, those who have heard the kettle and come to see whether anything needed returning, a small circle of faces lit by the shop's warm spill. There is soft, private talk. The twins, who have somehow kept the bakery's bell in their minds all day, have taken it upon themselves to organize a little presentation. They stand on tiptoe and pull the umbrella from its peg, presenting it to Lily again, but this time held with exaggerated gravity, as if they were offering her the village itself. They tell a small, earnest story about how Seamus had been telling tales in the square about the oracle of the kitchens, and how Mrs. Larkin had said that a good umbrella can be like a compass when weather makes the world unsure. The story is less important than the motion. Neighbors encircling, hands offering, the umbrella held like a small, bright standard. Lily hears their small speeches, some clumsy, some deep, and feels the filament of community warmth tighten in a way words do not often allow. The umbrella, green with yellow polka dots and sporting its duck handle, is both what it is and a thing that stands for care. She accepts it again in public, this time with a smile that drinks in the attention and feels it repay a debt she scarcely thought she had. In the dream, the umbrella becomes a talisman, hanging over the bakery door and shedding a soft, protective light over all comers. In the afternoon's reality, it is simply hung on a peg, where it can dry, and where anyone who needs a little extra cheer might take a look. The twins' bell tinkles, and the sound is a small declaration. Someone mentions, in passing, how lately the fog has seemed kinder. Rose laughs because she believes slightly more in small miracles than she lets on. Seamus, who has come back in time to catch the tail of the gathering, murmurs that nothing much has changed, but everything feels better for the people in it. There is no thunderous revelation, only a mutual comprehension as soft and necessary as bread. As the evening moves toward its end, Lily returns to the kitchen and gathers the parcels she has prepared. Apples wrapped in brown paper, cookies stacked in neat cones, a small slab of peppermint fudge tucked into waxed paper. She arranges them on the counter like small, practical offerings. The fairy lights blink their last steady blink for the day, and the rain's voice grows thin, as if the street is closing itself up. Lily pulls her apron off and folds it with the same care she gives dough. Careful, precise, respectful. She brushes her hands on the cloth, tasting, in the smallest way, the lingering ghosts of sugar and citrus. There is a moment, one of those breath-shaped pauses, where she stands by the window and watches the fog begin to recede. The lamplight regain the shameless contours of faces. The pavement reflect the cautious gleam of shop fronts. The bakery is a small island of warmth. In the dream, she has been an oracle of sorts, a person through whom small revelations filtered. That is an image she allows. It sits alongside the plainer memory of making things and giving them away. The dream's language gives the day a legend, and the legend writes back a softness into ordinary facts. Night settles without fanfare. Lily locks the door and turns the key with the well-known settled motion of someone who has closed a room and left a small warmth inside for others. The umbrella remains hung on its peg, homeward facing. She turns off the fairy lights one by one, and the last glow blinks its good night. The kettle has long since gone quiet. Only the oven's residual warmth hums faintly, a domestic echo. At home, in a small room above the bakery, Lily eases herself toward bed. The sheet slides cool across her legs, and the pillow folds its familiar shape when she lays her head upon it. She keeps the new umbrella propped by the bed for a time. Its bell gives a single, polite ring, as if acknowledging the day. And then she moves it to a chair where it will wait. The house breathes with her in a soft, measured way. A settling of the wood, the last tiny tick of the clock, the distant, damp whisper of rain still finding its voice on the street. She thinks, briefly, of everything the day held. The precise crumple of pastry, the crackle of pumpkin seeds, the cookies' stained glass, the ribbons of chocolate dissolving into themselves, the bulbs sunk into their beds, the umbrella's small, jaunty courage. None of it is large in the way the world sometimes asks for largeness. Instead, it is a scaffolding of small acts that add up until the village feels less like a collection of houses and more like a single living room with many lamps. Before sleep takes her fully, she opens the cookbook and reads, for pleasure more than instruction, a few more of her grandmother's marginal notes. Keep your hands warm and your heart patient. One line advises, the ink smudged where a thumb must have lingered. She smiles to herself and lets the book close on its own accord. It is a quiet litany, a private benediction. Outside, the rain has decided to be only a memory now. It taps at the window like a slow footfall, a distant assurance. The fog lifts like a curtain finishing its sweep, and the street resumes its honest, undramatic shape. Somewhere, a lamp clicks to life and someone else in the neighborhood closes their shop and sets out a pot of tea. The small routines of the world slide into place like notes in a lullaby. Lily allows herself to be led by that lullaby. Her breaths lengthen and loosen. The day's tactile memories, sugar between fingers, the faint grit of toasted seeds, the cool firmness of a bulb, rearrange themselves into a softer theater that is easier to inhabit. The dream thread threads itself through the ordinary, coloring rather than remaking. Ovens as hearths that offer counsel in warmth, spices as tiny runes that trace comfort across a palate, the fog as a veil that separates the day's hard edges from a more forgiving dark. Each image is prefaced by the gentle truth that it is a dream's reading, a poetic lens, and yet knowing that does not make the vision any less tender. As the house settles, the neighborhood's hum dwindles to a thin, distanceable murmur. The umbrella's bell, now quiet, rests. The fairy lights are a memory behind her eyelids as they begin their private, luminous fade. Lily's breathing slows to the same measured cadence as the rain on the street. Inhale and exhale, like a small tide. And the day's small rituals settle into the body, as if they were part of its natural architecture. If this evening has been what you needed, a gentle thing that sits with you like a hand on the shoulder, let that lightness carry you now. Allow the images to fold and refold until they are soft at the edges. Let the smell of cinnamon and pressed apples drift away like small boats on a dark river. The dream's images, oven counsel, sprinkled runes of spice, and the umbrella's bright promise may travel with you as you drift. When you wake, you'll find another dream waiting. If you would like more evenings like this, a small click will bring the next one. For now, surrender to the slow music of rain and to the bakery's quiet promise that ordinary things, tended and shared, can read like kindness. Let your breath match the rain's steady hand. Let the room hold you. Let the dream, if it wishes, take you softly by the sleeve and lead you onward into sleep.